Most people think of a burial site as a permanent resting place. They wish to see their loved ones rest undisturbed in a carefully chosen location. The Georgia General Assembly agrees with this sentiment and declared that human remains and burial objects are not property to be owned, but are a part of the finite, irreplaceable, and non-renewable cultural heritage of the people of Georgia, which should be protected.
Those burial sites are places that my ancestors have been buried. They're part of our history. They're part of our heritage as Georgians. And I think we need to be concerned about them for that reason.
These burial grounds are sacred to us, and we feel an obligation because these past generations can no longer speak for themselves. We feel an obligation that we should do everything that we can to protect these burials. It's a matter of human dignity.
4 fundamental principles guide burial protection laws. The first is respect for the religious beliefs of all Americans, including American Indians. The second is respect for the dead. The third is the protection of archaeological sites, because these sites are part of our common heritage. The fourth is responsible behavior by all Georgians regarding the treatment of human remains. Human history in the Southeast goes back more than 12,000 years. Millions of people have been buried in many kinds of places. The problem with protection of ancient burials is that many are not as visible as those at the large sites like Etowah, Kolomoki, and Okmulgee. Many burials have been lost in time. Others may only be traces in the ground. Some left no traces at all because the physical remains simply disappeared. There are many earth mounds, shell middens or rings, rock walls, rock mounds, and rock piles scattered across the Southeast. Some are burials, and some have no purpose that we know today.
It's often really tough to determine whether or not a pile of rocks actually relates to prehistoric Indians or something from, say, the 19th or even 20th century. We like to find artifacts, potsherds, or things that are actually under the mound, that help us actually date when the mound was built. But in many cases, there just aren't any, either from the modern period or from the prehistoric period. So oftentimes, it's just a matter of context. Where the site is the way the rock pile built consistent with what we know for prehistoric piles? Maybe that there might be some charcoal, ash that's underneath the rock that can be carbon dated.
One of the most frequent requests that the Indian Council gets in terms of examining potential burials are rock piles. There are literally thousands of rock piles across Georgia, particularly in the Piedmont, and many citizens believe these are Indian burials. We've excavated almost 75 of these now, and none of them have had conclusive proof or any good evidence of them being Indian burials. Archaeologists have excavated some rock features in Georgia that have been Indian construction and have had Indian burials. These tend to be large mounds. They tend to be rock configurations that are 20, 30, 50, 60 feet in diameter, 3, 4, 5, 6 feet tall. One rule of thumb archaeologists can apply, it's not totally uniform, is that the larger rock mounds tend to be Indian burial sites. The smaller piles, the ones that are like 10 feet in diameter, just a foot or two tall like this, tend to not be, so far, have not been Indian burials.
In 1992, the Georgia General Assembly passed several laws dealing with burial grounds and the respectful treatment of human remains and burial objects. These laws set forth specific requirements for protecting all burial sites and also provide ways to repatriate remains or burial objects that may have been dug up in the past and are now part of museum or private collections. The Georgia Council for Native American Concerns was established to help with these processes. Made up of members representing the different Native American tribes located in Georgia, the Council works with local and state agencies on a variety of topics related to Native American life. The Council has proven invaluable in overseeing the protection and preservation of this irreplaceable resource. The population of Georgia has grown by 2 million people in the last 30 years. These new residents like the same kinds of places to live that earlier people did. With more development every year, more and more early burial sites are at risk. Many burials have been destroyed because they were not recognized, but others are destroyed by unthinking collectors who wish to add artifacts to their collection. They revere the ancient crafts and arts of early Georgians, but simply do not take the feelings of these early people's descendants into consideration. Unfortunately, there are those who wish to profit from robbing the graves of our ancestors, whether they be American Indians, Civil War soldiers, or jewelry from marked graves.
Removing artifacts from Indian burials is the same thing as going into a contemporary graveyard and taking rings off of people's fingers or taking other items that may have been buried with people. It's grave robbing, and it's just stealing. That's what it boils down to.
How would you feel if I got together, say, 10 warriors from our tribe, and we come across some artifacts of your grandmother or your grandfather, and we pilfered those graves? We took from the remains what we wanted to take, got on the email, and began to black market it and sell it here and sell it there. Kind of make you cringe a little bit. We feel the same way about the remains of our people.
And I think people sometimes look at them and think, well, it's not marked. It must not really be a burial site, or maybe it's not as bad to take those things that are in there. They're not in the casket, but it's still stealing. Those things were still buried with a person, so it's still stealing.
Prehistoric burials were, of course, originally intended to be permanent, and we have to realize that each person, each burial that we encounter as archaeologists or even as developers and road builders, each burial represents a human person, a single human life who had presumably relatives and children perhaps, and they lived their lives and died on the landscape in which we live. And so we have to respect the dignity and the culture in which they were a part.
Ultimately, we are all responsible for the preservation of our state's heritage and natural resources. The protection of these irreplaceable parts of our culture is a bond that we share with those who went before us. If you ever discover what you suspect is a Native American burial site, please notify the proper authorities. Don't dig for artifacts. Ask yourself this: what if it were your grandmother?
Georgia citizens, this is their heritage too. It ties in with our heritage. And so we all have to work together to protect Georgia's heritage as a whole.